Good afternoon, Suddenly Homeschooling Moms. This is Sandy Cook, owner of Learning Able Kids and author of Overcome Your Fear of Homeschooling. Today, I wanted to talk to you about what is called the Dunn and Dunn Learning Styles Model, and that's D-U-N-N and D-U-N-N, Learning Styles Model. I like this model because it is different from most other models. It is one that allows you to establish what I would consider the perfect environment for learning based on your child's specific individual needs. So there are a lot of things that come into this model that are things that you could consider for making an environment that's favorable for your child's learning. So the first one, there are actually 5 categories of areas to consider. And so the first one is actually called environmental considerations, and it's things like sound. Does your child like it quiet? Does he like music? Does he learn well with background noise? I mean, like my youngest child loves listening to heavy rock, and I don't see how he learns doing that because I personally have to have it quiet. So he has some noise canceling headphones and he listens to his music while he's doing his schoolwork, and it actually enables him to focus more because he says the little sounds in the environment aren't distracting to him when he's got his music playing. The second environmental element is light, whether a person likes it bright or dim or somewhere in between. Some people like natural light, some people like a desk lamp. I personally can't stand a desk lamp. I like natural light. So that is another aspect to consider in your child's learning environment. Third one is temperature. Sometimes kids like it cool. They like to be wrapped up in a blanket. Sometimes they like it warm where they can wear a t-shirt or whatever. It is a little bit difficult if you're homeschooling multiple kids and they have different needs for their temperature. Hey Renee, nice to see you. And thank you for joining me. And anyway, so with the temperature, your child may desire different temperature levels, so you would have to kind of balance that for your family. And another element in the environment is seating. Sometimes kids like to sit on a round bouncy ball, especially kids that like to wiggle and move. That allows them to have some activity without necessarily being distracting in their sitting. Some kids like to sit at a desk, some like to sit at a table, some like to lay on their stomachs on the floor, However your child prefers to prone himself, whether sitting or laying or whatever, while learning, while you're homeschooling, you can let them do whatever suits them. So that's the environmental category, the main aspects there. The next one is an emotional category. So for your child, where they are emotionally with their learning, whether they are self-motivated or they need encouragement. And of course, if they're self-motivated, you don't really have to do anything to encourage that. But if they need encouragement, you need to be aware of that so that you can prompt them and encourage them, give them positive feedback, thank them for trying, tell them how proud you are for they're working on it and that sort of thing. There's a level of personal responsibility that comes in the emotional category too, whether your child feels accountable to themselves for their learning, or do they need to be accountable to you for their learning, or what is their source of feeling of responsibility to actually desire to do something. So that is a category that's a little bit different and tricky to deal with, but it is one to be aware of. Task persistence, how much your child will do, especially if the learning is frustrating for them. Will they do it readily and easily? Do they persist? Or do they give up easily? And in the case where they give up easily and they don't have a lot of built-in persistence, then you might have to work on encouraging them more. And then there's structure, emotional structure. Some kids like very high levels of predictability and structure, and other kids get very bored and antsy if they have a high level of structure. So letting things be more loose and free-flowing will work better for kids who are emotionally freer in their spirits and don't really like the structure. So that is sometimes difficult for parents to manage, like when we talked about the visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and tactile learning styles, and a lot of people teach in the auditory style, but kids don't necessarily learn that way. It's kind of the same thing with structure. Some parents are highly structured and their kids are not. or vice versa. And so those are places where there can be conflict. So it's good to be really aware of that so that you can mediate that level of disconnect between you and your child to make the environment easier for you to manage and easier for them to learn. So it's a good factor to be aware of. Then there's the sociological category. Sociological has to do with how many people your child likes to learn with. Some kids like to do solitary learning. My oldest son in particular would like to go in his room and just sit at his own desk and do his work, and that's perfectly fine. My younger son, he wanted help, and he wanted help specifically from me, an adult. He didn't really value input from peers, but the categories on that are self, like learning alone, learning in a pair, which can be either with a peer or can be with a parent, because there's the category that's an adult pairing. And then there's peers where you're working in a small group, and teams where you're working in a bigger group. And then there's variety. Some kids like to learn alone sometimes and learn in groups other times. And so it's good to be aware of what your child's preferences are so that in whatever way possible in your house, you can work around that. Particularly if you have a couple of kids that like pairing, then putting them in a room together to learn helps them both. But if you have a child that likes to learn by themselves and another child that likes to learn with somebody, then it will help that child that likes to learn with somebody to be in the room with you when they are learning. So those are aspects of sociological learning that need to be considered. Then there's physiological. Physiological has to do with how hungry a person is, whether they are like alert or crabby. Some people learn better when they are on a full stomach. Some people, when they have a full stomach, feel tired and lethargic, want to take a nap. So they do better with a little bit emptier of a stomach, that sort of thing. That particular aspect is called intake. What does your child's level of intake need to be at the time when their learning is most effective? And why is this important? This is important because if you are going to work on a very difficult subject with your child, then picking the prime learning opportunity, the time where they are at their best for learning, makes that learning easier for your child. And it makes it easier for you to teach your child because they are at a good prime place for learning. And so with all of the learning style stuff, when you look at what we talked about over the last couple of days and what we're talking about today, to the maximum extent you can build the perfect learning environment for your child, that will ease their learning the most, and it will make your job easier. Now, it is more difficult for you up front because you have to identify their needs, plan for their needs, get that in place, and then work with those needs. But it is something you are able to do at home, which just doesn't happen in a typical classroom. So on the other physiological aspects, there is time of day, like when they first get up. Are they an early riser, late riser? Do they work better when they first get up, or do they work better after they've been energized some? And then there's mobility. How much activity do they need in their day to be able to focus and learn? And so meeting those needs are core physiological needs that aren't really anything the child can control. It's just their biology that determines those needs. And then last of all, there's psychological. And so in this category with the Dunn and Dunn styles, they have two styles they call analytical and global. And that's being aware of whether your child wants all of the details first to build the big picture, or if they need to understand the big picture first and then work down to the details after that. So it's sort of approaching it from two different directions, whether your child is a big picture thinker or a detail thinker. So if they're a detail thinker, you start with the details. If they're a big picture thinker, you teach them why is this important overall before you teach them the details and the facts that go with it. And there is also a reflective and an impulsive learner, where some learners will want to do and act to instill the learning within themselves, and others need some quiet time and space to reflect on and think about what they're learning. So to the greatest extent that you can build all of these different environmental aspects into your child's learning environment, it will help improve the ease with which your child can learn. So the Dunn and Dunn learning styles model, I will post a link under this video to my webpage that has that information, and there's a really nice chart there that you can print that picture, and it's, you know, it'll give you a template to go from and considering each of those different things. And then there's also a link there to the testing profile that you can use with your child to help figure out each of these elements in regard to your, you know, individual child. And the assessment there, it's in the range of $5 to $10. I meant to look exactly what it is right now before I came live, but I forgot to do that. So anyway, I will put a link under this video for you, and I hope this information is helpful that we've gone over this week about learning styles. And if you have any questions, feel free to post them and I will answer them to my best ability. And otherwise, it's Friday. Congratulations, you've made it through another week at home with your kids, and I hope that you have a blessed, uplifting, and fun weekend. Love y'all. Bye.